Hello, fellow classmates. We've learned about variables and we've learned about functions in class, and there's a small little peculiarity to how functions and variables interact with one another that I'm pretty sure we have not covered in class. So I thought that might be a good topic for this little video tutorial. So let's set up a very, very simple little demo project here that will be very simple right now, and then it will get confusing pretty quickly. So we'll just create, obviously, a variable, assigning it to the string hello world to it, and then we'll create a simple function, and we'll just have it do something simple like print that variable back out for us. And then, of course, at the end of our script, we will execute the function. So if I press go on this one, it should just, sure enough, it gives me hello world, and that's what we kind of expect. That's nothing new. That's pretty common. I don't know that we've learned necessarily the fact that the reason this works is because this is what's called a global variable. The scope of the variable is what they call global because it's created here out in sort of this global namespace of the program, and then by the time you get into this function, it knows about myvar because myvar exists, and it's there, and it's a part of the bigger program at large. In fact, we can kind of demonstrate that in a way if we just stuff it down here outside of this function. We should get the same result twice because we get the variable printed out in the function, and we get the variable printed outside of the function. Okay, so what if in a program later on you decide that you really need another function to create that variable for you? And that's not really uncommon. You might be processing data, and the end result of the processing of that data may be your variable with, like, something more interesting than just a plain string. Maybe it would be like the results of some inputs or something like that. So it's not unheard of at all to have a function creating a variable, and then later on in your application or your script or program, you want to then reuse that variable. Seems simple enough, right? Well, if we hit go on this, you see pretty quickly that it doesn't really work the way that we might have thought it would. It gives us an error, and the error specifically tells us that the name myvar is not defined. Well, of course it's defined, right? It's up here in our little create var function. But what's happening here, obviously, is that there's sort of an invisible shell or force field or something around each function, right? This variable's not getting out of that function into the next function. Obviously, if we went back and just said, okay, I give up, we'll create the variable outside of all that, then yeah, it works because it's been created in this sort of global space. And you can even see that we create the variable and then it gets sort of recreated here. But again, this version of that variable never gets outside of this function. It's completely locked up, okay? So these are called local variables. They're not global. They are local to their functions. But obviously, at some point, you need them to talk to each other. You can't always have you can't always have variables confined to their functions. At some point, you need to start passing variables from one function to another. And you in theory could make everything global, but there are lots of ramifications to that, like memory usage and processing usage, and just the fact that sometimes you want something to happen in a function and then to end up in another function. So the way to do that, to get variables in and out of their functions, is what I think of them as portals. I'm sure there's a much more technical term for that, but these little guys right here, these little parentheses right after the names of the functions, they're kind of significant. And if we, for instance, place myvar into these parentheses, what we're saying then is that, okay, so if we execute this function, we're telling Python to demand that we give it some information. And we can even see that in practice. If I press go again, we get another error. We're going to see a lot of errors in this video. There's another error, and it says first function takes exactly one argument, and we've given it 0. And that is true. We told it that we want one argument. We want something in between those parentheses, and then we executed the function, leaving the parentheses completely blank. And sure enough, if we enter something in there, we get that something back out. So what's happening there is that we're executing the function, we're giving it this literal string foo, and that literal string gets passed into this function as myvar, and then myvar is printed back out. So that works, but I mean, it also doesn't work because obviously it doesn't exactly solve our problem, right? We're still not getting the real myvar out of our create variable function, and that is ultimately our goal. Okay, so the way that we can do that then is to keep using those portals, or what I call portals. So in this case, really a variable. We just need another variable. So we will create a variable. I'm going to call it portal because it sounds cool. And we will give portal, we will make portal the results of this first function. So we'll just say the portal is going to equal whatever happens when you run create var. And then we're going to say, instead of passing some random string that we just made up, we're going to give the first function this little portal variable. So now we're saying, okay, execute first function using the contents of portal, and that'll become myvar, and then it'll print myvar out in theory. Now this won't work. I mean, it will work, but there's one missing component, or one or two missing components, one I think, that gives us an unexpected result. It just says none. I mean, that's better than an error, and it's better than something random like foo or portal, but it's still not what we want. So there is an answer to this. I'm not permitted to give it to you because the video submission guidelines specified that we cannot provide the ultimate answer. So I will tell you that you do know the answer. It is something that you have learned, that we have learned in class, and I'm going to kind of leave it up to you to put in the last component to actually make it work. So good luck with that. Have fun. I think you'll get it. But hopefully this has kind of helped you understand the flow of all this data. And I should probably tell you, just to kind of clarify some things. We'll change this back to foo. So now we should get something back. Yeah, we do. We get foo. The fact that this is called myvar and this is called myvar is just kind of based on my expectation of what we should get here. It's not technically necessary. We could call it anything. As long as these two match, that flow of, and we'll change this to something else just so we can see something change. That flow of information is happening. So we're saying first function, give it this string. That string becomes sort of renamed as a new variable, or it's really an argument, and then we're saying, okay, print out whatever you were given. So it doesn't have to be myvar. I just called it myvar because the expectation of what we are doing in the program is that we're sort of getting this variable out of this function, although we're doing it in this roundabout way, and that is how it's done. You take it out of one function, you put it into a variable, and then you pass that variable into your second function. It becomes whatever you tell it to become, and then it gives you that information in the output. So again, I'm not going to give you the missing component. Like right now, we're still left with a big none here. We want it to be hello world. So give that a shot, see if you can fix it. And thanks for watching. Hopefully that has helped.